Hi guys, welcome back to Rancor Exotics and thanks for clicking on the video. Now today we're going to be talking about the Brookesia genus, or the pygmy leaf chameleons. For saving my tongue, I'm just going to call them pygmies. This genus is found exclusively in Madagascar, which is, a great place where a lot of unique animals come from. They come from the rainforest floors. Of course, this is a whole genus, so the type of the range of climates they live in kind of differ. However, they're mostly found on rainforest floors, which for us as keepers offers a unique opportunity to keep this very small genus, unlike their bigger counterparts. And I'll talk to you a little bit about them. However, this species does come with a major caveat that might be a deal breaker for some of you guys, and that is the fact that these guys aren't really captive bred. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the husbandry. Now for setup, what would you need for these guys if you want to get some? Now, I read online that an 18 by 18 by 18 cube front facing terrarium would be best. This is for an adult male, an adult female, and maybe another female. I really think that with the chameleon you should get an 18 by 18 by 24 to get that little extra height. But again, from what I've read, this species is small enough to be kept in that size of enclosure. For lighting, now for lighting, for temperature, you really don't need it. These guys thrive at room temperature being right around 74 degrees. Basking spot, they really don't need a very high basking spot, so you can create a small one in the upper layer of your terrarium with a low wattage bulb. They like it right around the mid 80s for a basking spot. This species really isn't one for heat. UVB for lighting, though, because this species does tend to live on the rainforest floor, a lot of the members in this genus really don't need UVB. However, I think that for a species this small and delicate and rare, I do believe that giving them their best shot should be done, and I do think that UVB should be provided for these guys, even though they might not 100% require it like bearded dragons do. They don't necessarily need a bioactive enclosure. They do like plants, they do like climbing. I highly encourage anybody that buys this species to have a nice planted tank. Of course, you have to have this tank scaped up for a chameleon. Have like umbrella plants and other plants that grow a little taller for these guys. Simply because I think that having a bioactive enclosure would give them the best shot. After all, a lot of these guys are going to be ripped out of the wild. So if you are going to get one, you want to emulate where they come from as much as possible. So bioactive would probably be giving them a best bet, and the enclosure being bioactive also provides things like isopods, springtails that I might munch on, and we'll get into that in husbandry. What else would you need here? I hear that sticks and barks, they like to climb and hide on that type of stuff. Of course, I've heard that through the grapevine that they like twigs and bark that match their colors more, and they have a preference for it. I'm not quite sure. I don't have hands-on experience with them yet. I would like to. But yeah, you'd like any chameleon, a lot of nice climbing surfaces that these guys are able to get a hold of. And these guys being fairly small, that'll mean twigs and small plants with sturdy enough stems. Now for husbandry. These guys, like I said, are going to be ripped out of the wild, so you're going to have to treat for parasites. Preferably, you'd want to get them checked out at a vet before you put them into their enclosures. simply because you want to make sure that they're not carrying any type of parasites or any other type of bugs, and introduce that into your house and maybe into your collection. Now, because of this, I do think you should, on top of the supplements, you do have to give them their proper amounts of vitamins, powder for calcium, and you're probably have to give them worm guard, type of anti-parasitic, for a certain amount of time. Your vet will probably tell you more of the specifics on that. However, I can foresee that being something you'd have to dose. Now, for the type of feeders these guys get, I've heard they're not very much into larvae. They're very much into things like crickets. They're into like calcium worm, phoenix worm flies, things that are more active. They're really not into larvae too much. You can gut load these insects, like always, as you should, with vegetables and other type of powders, and then powder these guys up with, like I said, vitamins and calcium, and maybe the worm guard for a scheduled time. Now, you can try to cohab a known male, which you can see by the bulges at the base of their tail, a male, and a female. Now, if you don't have any experience with them, maybe you can buy a sexed pair from somebody that does have experience and has already figured out their sexes for you. If you're getting two babies, I really don't recommend cohabbing them. I would only cohab a known male and a known female. And again, that's you knowing what the sexes are right off the bat. If you get two males, they're going to be very territorial, and they'll probably butt heads, and you'll probably have to throw one of them away because they'll be splattered all over the enclosure. Alright, so for breeding, these guys, like all chameleons, there's not really much of a set time, like after 2 years after hatching. These guys will be the sexual maturity based on weight. From what I've read, adults reach adulthood when they're 5 to 6 grams, giving you an idea how small these guys are. And sexing them is fairly easy, again, because the males will have that characteristic bulge and females won't. Females, when you do pair them up and they do lock, females will lay around 4 egg clutches, and they will lay this type of clutch once around every 4 months. It's actually every 3 to 6 months, but it's about every 4 months. And if you do have a female that has been locked with, I would put down a corner of wet moss, wet sphagnum moss, so the female can go there, dig up, and lay her eggs there. Now, these eggs will be pretty big compared to the female, be like a tic tac, but still they're pretty big eggs compared to the animals. So they'll be a little easier to spot, and providing that wet corner or humid corner really does narrow down where you need to dig these eggs up, because you don't want to dig up your whole enclosure in order to find these eggs. Now, for incubation of these eggs, these guys really don't need any an incubator. They can incubate at room temperature, which is right around 75 degrees. The humidity doesn't need to be too high. The humidity needs to be around 75 to 85% humidity. Unlike ball python eggs that need max humidity as for the whole incubation period, these guys really don't need too much high humidity. They will hatch after around 90 days into a very tiny chameleon. So when these guys hatch, you'll probably need to have things like small fruit flies and maybe even springtails. They'll probably eat those up. If you don't catch an egg, and they do have the possibility of hatching inside of the enclosure, and you probably won't know you have a baby until you see one hunting around on the floor. of your enclosure. So that's why it's important to have a bioactive, just in case. That way they have a food source, even though you're not providing one directly. Now, for availability, these guys aren't really available very much. Unlike the viper gecko, these guys are even a little harder to find than the abronias. These guys are not common. I found them once before at a pet store. Once before, and it was a specialty pet store. And that was 20 odd years ago, and I've never seen them since at a pet store. At expos, I haven't seen them either. I've seen them sparingly online. Now, when I have found them online, most of the time that I've seen is that they're offered wild caught. Rarely do I find one that are captive bred. I've dug through a lot of forums, and there's a lot of people looking for them captive bred. It's just that there's not many offered. Alright, and on top of that, these guys, Brookesia, the pygmies, are all really under CITES 2 or CITES 1. In other words, that they're either endangered of being threatened or threatened directly with extinction. I know that the Brookesia nana, one of the smallest chameleons in the world, is being threatened with extinction due to habitat loss. But most of the members are in CITES 2, meaning that there are trade regulations on the amount of individuals coming out of Madagascar. So that'll probably tighten the amount of supply you can get wild caught, which I believe is a good thing. I believe that these guys should be, the few that are offered, should be offered more frequently to breeders that are making the effort to make these guys captive bred. So these guys individually, for a tiny chameleon, they go around $200, which is quite a lot, because you can get a much lower, you can get like a baby veiled chameleon for like $60. And the reason for that is, quite frankly, supply and demand. There's a lot of veils on the market and almost no pygmies. If you find a pygmy, it's probably it's a rare availability, and they'll probably get snatched up fairly quickly. Now, the cons for this species is, first of all, they're too small for handling. Unlike a panther or a veil or a Jackson's chameleon, these guys are far too small, far too delicate to hold. Of course, if you're going into pygmy chameleons, that's something you're willing to compromise on, because these guys are known for being small. They save a lot of space. There's a small captive bred population. If you really want something well established, I recommend buying captive bred. Getting in contact with the breeder that has been known to produce this genus, and to maybe get put on a waiting list for a captive bred individual. And lastly, if you are going to breed these guys and you are successful, you're going to need a very small feeders for the babies. Now, I ran by this species fairly quickly. My personal take on this species is that it's a great chameleon because you can keep it inside glass enclosures, which is great because that helps keep in humidity. It really helps with the care of these guys. However, the fact that there's not a lot of these guys on the market, I believe that these guys should be acquired by people fully intending to breed. I don't believe, because they're threatened and they're particularly from Madagascar, I believe that this species should be babied a little more. People should take real care on where they buy these guys from. Again, if you do get these guys, please buy them with the intention to breed, to properly care for them. These guys, I don't want to see people buying them just because they look cool, have them shipped in. They're not looked after properly, and they die because the buyer forgot that they're wild caught and didn't treat them for parasites. You know, it'd be a sad day to see such a beautiful small chameleon pass away because of buyer oversight. So in closing, these are very tiny mini hunters that will do great in the proper enclosure with the proper care, with the proper husbandry. Since these guys are so small, I think these guys will make the great apartment chameleon. They don't need a big enclosure to care for. Though they're not prolific breeders, they are very rewarding. They're very small, very cute, and above all, I think that this species offers a wide range and a lot of different looks. A lot of these guys look absolutely amazing. Of course, they're not one for handling. However, why would you want to handle such delicate art to begin with? Alright, so this has been my bird's eye view on the Brookesia genus, or the pygmy leaf chameleons. If you have anything else to add, or you find any errors in any of the information I gave, please leave it in the comments. I'll try to correct and edit the video. Yeah, so let me know about what you think about the species. Do you think it's a good idea to get these guys imported? Or do you think that we should be focusing solely on breeding the population we have now? Alright guys, well, have a good one. Thanks for clicking on the video, and I'll see you in the next one.